we've been together for over 24 hours, and you all have eaten together and spent time together, and this one, we're gonna have to wing a little bit. This was originally going to be a breakout session. We'd all sit in a circle. It would be very, very calm and in a smaller room. But it became clear very quickly that everyone wanted to come to this session. And we're doing something a little scary here, which is we're talking about the stuff that we usually gossip about, privately. And gossip is not a really good way to bring about change. And I've actually found that there's an intolerance growing. Instead of a new perspective coming out from our community and turning, opening doors, there's a lot of pent-up anger and frustration and feeling unheard and feeling marginalized in a whole new way. And I think this is the time, as we're really getting going as an organization, to say, do we want to just turn into a reaction, or do we want to be something starting out that is positive, but has a point of view? And one risk of trying to get along is that we would just kind of homogenize to the point where we made everyone happy and it was all very butterfly and sweet. Nothing against butterflies. But I'm concerned that we make sure that our activism is done where we avoid some of the problems that we're seeing, for example, in the autism world, where very, very ugly conflicts went on between parents. And this has happened in other fields. I'm sure we can think of a lot of examples where activists actually just become a whole other system where we're perpetuating the anger and we're not actually hearing one another. And I have the advantage now of having been doing this kind of work and meeting people in the eating disorder world for a while. I've not yet met one that didn't truly care. I've never met anyone in the eating disorder field, professional activist who was in it for the money. It's not a really good strategy financially. So I'm going to assume that everybody's coming from a good place and that we're going to actually hear one another. We're going to be tolerant of the fact that there are a lot of people in this room and we probably won't be able to hear every single person. So we're each going to need to keep our remarks brief, like I'm not doing now. But I just want to set the tone, which is I've learned so much in the last 9 years. I've changed in the last 9 years because I've met actual people who I disagreed with and talked to them and found out that most of the problem was actually language. And as a writer, that's fascinating. The conflicts that we're having mostly really actually aren't ideological. A lot of them have to do with the language that we're using. If you use the word evidence-based, it has so much import on both sides and has caused all this negativity. But if you actually sit down with someone and talk about what they really mean, the conflict seems to melt because we actually are talking pretty much about the same thing, and we all have the exact same goal. So I'm not really believing that we're going to have bloodshed here, but I do want to make sure that we make this as comfortable an environment as possible to speak up with respect, and respect between equals. We are all equals here, clinicians and parents and activists. I'm especially pleased that we've drawn, into our event here, people that are not F.E.A.S.T insiders. And so there are 3 people here that I'm very pleased that I'm going to introduce specifically, not because this isn't a conversation between all of us, but because there are people that I have talked to about these conflicts in the field, and they are experienced people in activism and in getting things done. And I think we have a great deal to learn from these 3 people. So I wanted to draw on their experience, and I'm very honored that all 3 of you are here, and I want to introduce you. So Laura DeCipio is from Enid. I want you all to meet her. And I'd like to give you a moment if you'd like to speak to the audience about what you do and your thoughts on any of the issues that we're talking about today. And you can use the microphone or... Yes, she's mic'd for that.
Oh, okay. Well, good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today. And I've really enjoyed the last few days being out here and getting to know many of the people that are in the room. I'm the executive director of ANED. ANED is the National Association of Anorexia Nervosa and Associated Disorder. It's like a roller coaster. I should take a deep breath when I say it. It's a 35-year-old organization, and it started back prior to internet, prior to emails, prior to any of that. And it started with a nurse who worked at Highland Park whose daughter was diagnosed with anorexia. And she was told, this is a rare disorder, take her home, there's not a lot we can do about it. Well, the tenacity that she had and the activism that she had inside of her, she worked and found more information and was able to get letters in the newspaper, and then finally that's how it's kind of just sprung up from her living room, and it continues to grow. And it's probably the most original eating disorder organization that we have. It's 35 years old. Vivian is now since retired. She's in her 80s, and as she's retired, the board, has appointed me as executive director. So I've been executive director for about 2 years, and part of that role as executive director is taking over for this landmark woman who is, a legend in her own right. And there was some struggles and some advocacy work we had to do just within the organization. But one of the things that I really believe, and I think this is one of the reasons that the board appointed me as executive director, is I believe that we all need to work together. And I was so impressed when I first started talking to Laura. I kind of heard different things about F.E.A.S.T, and I was really shocked that all the conversations I had with Laura. So that's kind of how the gossip mill goes. And when I work with some of my patients, I always say, or the kids, especially the younger girls, I say, gossip is like, squeezing toothpaste out. How do you get it back in? You really don't. And so we all have to be really careful about that, because I know everything that I've learned about Laura most recently has been wonderful and collaborative. And that's what I think all of us as organizations, we need to find the common ground. And I loved your first morning welcome speech that Laura had about finding the common ground. We all have some common ground in this room. We all here because we care. We're all passionate about what we do, and we all want to help move the eating disorder world forward, getting better treatment and better research. Now, and we want our children to recover, our loved ones to recover. The question starts to come into where we're a little bit different is, how do we do that? And sometimes it's, very similar to what we're trying to do. Each person has somewhat of a similar story, and what works for one person is not a cookie cutter. It's not going to work for everyone, and we have to be open that if it worked for you, whatever treatment you use, whatever facility you use, whatever program you use, and it worked for you, wonderful, great, we're excited about that. But we know there is not one form of treatment that's going to work for everyone. And I think it's just important to understand, to work together, and to be able to collaborate, even if you have a difference of opinion. I'm just now actually meeting one of my co-panel persons up here, but Shavis and I have just known each other for a year, and we've really found common ground in so many things, and we will disagree, but that's still okay. And making sure that just because I disagree with someone doesn't mean I'm all wrong, or they're all wrong, that really look for what's the common ground. So that's...
Next, I'd like to introduce someone is kind of one of my activist motivators, is Shavis Turner, the head of the Binge Eating Disorder Association.
Thank you, Laura. I really am truly honored to be here. I can so relate to so many of you. As parent activists, I have 2 young sons, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I do everything perfectly? How do I take what I've learned with my own eating disorder and in this wonderful community and impart that knowledge and the ability to model for them in a way that's going to be healthy And I know, even though the perfectionist in me, good eating disorder perfectionist, wants to be perfect, that I'm not going to be. But I can also relate in a different way. Binge eating disorder is not something that we include in our sentences when we talk about eating disorders. We say anorexia and bulimia. Sometimes we say EDNOS, but rarely have I heard a speaker in the last couple years include binge eating disorder in their talk, in their opening. That is changing, and I like to think that that is changing partly because I've been really annoying for the last 3 years and have attended as many conferences and meetings as possible and raised my hand whenever binge eating disorder was not mentioned. But I think that that is important. Those of us in the binge eating disorder community have felt for a very long time that we were sort of the redheaded stepchildren. We were not underweight. 70% of us are overweight. There's no clear treatment paradigm that is emerging at the top in terms of how this is treated successfully to lose weight or not to lose weight. For every issue that anorexia or bulimia has, binge eating disorder has similar issues. We have similar discussions. We have similar fights. I can relate so much to Laura when she talks about, infighting, outfighting. There's all kinds of things that go on in our community, and then we have to take that and interface into the greater eating disorder community. That's really difficult, especially with, sometimes I'm sitting in rooms with people who, as a person going through her eating disorder and reading those people's books, I idolized, and I thought they had the answers and they were so wise, and then I find myself disagreeing with them. That's very difficult. But I found what worked for me, finally, after 20 some odd years, and I remember having my first binge when I was 5, so that seeking, understanding that this was an eating disorder and then seeking treatment took many, many, many years. And I went through many, many different treatment centers and paradigms and so forth, and it took a very long time. And to Laura's point, not one single paradigm is going to work for every person out there with an eating disorder, including binge eating disorder. So I really, Laura, I think you're wonderful, and we have both of our parents were activists, and we had great role models in that respect, and I'm so thankful for that, and I know what this means to you having this group here, because 3 years ago Vita had its first conference, and I stood in front and spoke to the audience, and I wanted to cry. I couldn't believe that my folks were finally together. But it's become very, very important that we go out beyond the confines of binge eating disorder, that we work with the AED, with NEDA, with the small regional organizations, with F.E.A.S.T, with everyone, because we legitimately have eating disorders. Those of us with binge eating disorder do not have disordered eating. We have eating disorders, and the DSM will reflect that when it's published in 2013. So thank you once again. I'm very happy to be here, and I think you're a wonderful group, and I'm thrilled to be involved on any level I can.
I met Doug Funnell from Renfrew the first time I ever went to an eating disorder conference. My book had just come out. No one had ever heard of it. No one knew, no one was looking at my name tag. And I remember the first day that I was at that conference, I went up to my room and cried. I felt so alone and so among, people who didn't understand and didn't agree with me and, were, must be bad people because they were all walking around having a good time and they weren't talking about the things that mattered to me. And the next morning I got up and I went down to breakfast. I don't know if you remember this, but I went down to breakfast and there a gentleman, as I was leaving that night, I had a copy of my book in my purse. And I put it, and I was leaving dinner and I just handed it to this guy. And that I was at dinner with this group, and I said, I wrote this book. So I get up, I'm the kind of person who goes to a conference and I get up really early and I'm like Johnny, I get up. And so I go down to breakfast and there's this conversation going on about, something, and the guy gets up and it turns out it's that guy. And he gets up in front of the stage and he says, I was up last night reading this book. And he's talking about my book, and I was just blown away. And after he finished speaking, and I'm feeling like, oh, wow, that came up to me and shook my hand and said, these are some really interesting ideas, and I'm glad you're here. And I've never forgotten it. It changed. I don't know, what would have happened the rest of that day, but I know I had the energy to get through the rest of the day, and that meant a great deal to me. So I'm glad that you're here.
I distinctly remember it, and think of what's transpired since then to now is quite amazing. So,
For all of us.
Well, yes, but deserves some credit. Again, thank you for this opportunity to speak. Laura sort of said, hey, would you sit on this panel and sort of discussing what are we going to talk about? She said, well, we'll figure out when we get there. So we spent about 2 minutes before trying to figure out what we're going to talk about. I'm currently the director of outpatient training or clinical services and training for the Renfrew Center. So I oversee the clinical programs that are 8, soon to be 9 outpatient sites. That's sort of my day job. The job that's given me the most sort of gratifying experience in my life has been my involvement with NEDA, and specifically the part of NEDA 10 years ago, we pulled the regional organizations together into a national organization, and most importantly, opened up the field to families again. So in my mind, the best thing that's happened to the eating disorders field in the past 10 years has been family members coming back into it. It's brought light to the process, it's put pressure and sort of truth and honesty back into the mix, and accountability. It's not always comfortable, and I think we have to sort of tolerate that, and I think this sort of panel is one avenue for pursuing that. But practitioners and programs and so forth need to hear from families. We have an obligation to be open to family feedback. In the prior panel, I don't see her, in the very back, when you spoke to the ombudsman at the treatment center and sort of complained. Colleen, yes, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. That's such a powerful sort of example of what needs to happen. You're not getting the attention you deserve, and somebody needs to hear that. And I tell you, the treatment centers do take those comments seriously. They matter greatly. The one point, really, and then I'll sit down. One point I really want to emphasize is that the eating disorder field has a history of fragmenting. Prior to 2000, there were multiple organizations, sort of multiple agendas. I think to the extent that we fragment again, we dilute our message, and that it's really imperative that we keep looking to find common ground, unite the messages. We have different priorities, there are different issues that come up and different stances that come up, but there needs to be sort of a collective, communal commitment to the certain basic principles. And I think it's not an easy process, because we need to keep looking for forms to do that sort of thing. So I've seen that happen. Part of my mission, what gratifies me working in eating disorders advocacy, is trying to work at building those bridges and rebuilding them when they fall down. I'm delighted to be here, and I hope we can deepen that process.
Okay, so Stephanie's going to walk around with the mic, and I'll say here. And we're just going to kind of see how this goes. If you look at your agenda, I set out some questions that I'd most like us to discuss. And we'll see which ones, how far we get on this. But one thing that I want to really let people be able to talk about is there a special role for parents in advocacy? And by that I don't mean should parents just join in with general advocacy, but do parents have special needs or things to offer as advocates? As you know, we have an organization that is mostly focused on parents and caregivers. So would it be better, there's a dynamic there, should the parent community join in on the larger advocacy efforts, and add their voices? Or is there a role for just talking about parents? Because I have been criticized, and I think it's a valid thing to discuss, for being part of the fragmentation. And I want to, this is an opportunity for the parent community and the clinicians to be able to speak up on what that's doing, positive or negative. So I'd like to hear from as many of you on that as possible on that.
So naive, people are even going to ask why am I saying this, and I guess that's why I'm going to say it. It was only yesterday that I realized that there was even a division between F.E.A.S.T and Maudsley. And here I'm hearing about divisions in eating disorder. Why would there be divisions if we all have kids that have these eating disorders and we want to get them moving?
I think one of the reasons why, one of the reasons why there appears to be a division is we're also passionate about what we do, and we just this intense passion of what we do that we think we're right. And I'm so passionate, and I want you guys to do what I want you to do because I know I'm right and I'm going to save your child. And I think that is part of some of the questions that we all have is what is right. And I will tell you, the eating disorder world, we do struggle as a whole with really truly having a really perfect path of what you do for recovery. With most other illnesses that you have, it's pretty much you have stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 of what you're supposed to do. With an eating disorder, it is so complex. The treatment is so complex. Families are so complex. Each family, you not only treat the individual child or the loved one, you're treating the whole family. So you have so many different variables. And I think it's just hard. We're so passionate about it worked for me, I want it to work for you, that we kind of lose sight on the common ground of what does this family need and what is this family ready for? And I think if we could just sit back and know that we all have the same goal in mind, we all want the same thing, but we just want to drive there differently. And if we could just kind of understand that we're all so passionate about caring for our children and caring for our spouses or our loved ones, whoever that's in our life that's struggling, is understanding that everybody wants, that's the first common ground to really start with. Everybody wants them to get better. But the problem is we just don't have one specific way.
And we are a very young community. My past experience has been in the oncology field, and this is a well-developed community with plenty of money, which brings its own issues. But more advanced in terms of the work that it's done within parent group, or not parent group, but family groups, practitioner groups, just more advanced. And so when I stepped into this community as an activist, it was very clear to me that we were still in that very young stage of organizations coming to being, organizations collaborating together, gobbling one another up. There's a lot of positioning going on. I don't think that we can ignore the fact that we're all human and there are egos involved. I have my own ego. I have my organization ego. And I see parents that come to F.E.A.S.T that have had a different experience than mine perhaps, and want to tell me this is the way that we should be running this organizations, clinicians, the same thing. And the fact of the matter is that the art of building coalitions and organizations is really about having these types of very open discussions. I do not agree with everything I hear out there. I think there is wonderful evidence-based research being done. I also think there's not so wonderful evidence-based research being done. For everything that you can state, there's an opposing view, and so the tolerance that we need to have within individuals, organizations, this is going to take a while. this is going to take a while. NETA is still a fairly new organization. It was 2 organizations that came together, 5, and you're right. And who knows what's going to happen with various other organizations. They may, in the interest of being able to pull funding together and so forth, they may collaborate, come closer with other organizations. We don't know what this is going to look like, and so it's really, really important that we have these open conversations, that we cross-pollinate, and that we understand that there are going to be egos involved. There's going to be situations where we do not agree. There are going to be lines drawn in the sand and so forth, and life is messy. That's part of the thing that is really, really important to get to a place of recovery of an eating disorder, and I think that's what we need to do as a community as well, to understand that this is messy, it's not going to be pretty, and be able to tolerate that.
Actually, I want to ask you a question, because you and I kind of share the fact that we have started organizations that focus on a particular thing. And we've talked about what is the value in being all, like if we could create one worldwide eating disorder association that had huge power and lots of celebrities and money, would that be better? Or is, what's the role of having organizations that focus on particular things, and how do those relationships go? Like, you can speak to how the relationship goes with other organizations.
I have a political science background, and I think we live in a wonderful country that has its issues and its dysfunction, but I really like the idea that our founding fathers came up with a system that involved states and a federal government. We've got local autonomy, we have state autonomy, and then we have a federal system. I like that for organizational structures as well. I think if you look at some big companies, Johnson & Johnson, for instance, they buy companies, but then they give them autonomy. And as long as they're performing, they get their autonomy. And this is a very sort of high-level view to look at this. But I think that it's very important to have certain areas represented in the full capacity that they can be. Binge eating disorder was not represented well in the overall community, and so I felt the need to have that representation, to give people the empowerment to get what they needed from the overall community. That I've seen that work. I don't know what will happen with that. Will that continue to be the case, or will it be better to bring together feed it into a larger organization? I don't know. I don't think any of us know at this point. I think what you're doing here is very, very important, because you have given a voice that has not been out there before. You've said, we are parents, this is what we need from you, community. And NETA is doing that, but I think that sometimes it is good to have a very laser-like focus on what the issues are, and then be able to take that out into the greater community, because from a PR perspective, you have control of the message. You get to say what the most important issues are, and that then resonates with the rest of the community. And again, it's not going to be pretty. Did I answer? I feel like
I think you have special knowledge of that. Robin would like you to have both. Okay. Sorry.
On the one hand, on the other one. I can just, by example, in the early 2000s, after NETA had been formed and so forth, we inherited at that time what seemed to be a pretty fractious relationship with the Academy for Eating Disorders. I'm not offending anyone, but that's sort of a polite term for it. And we really worked hard to look for ways to bring together. One thing we did is we actually exchanged board members. And we had a board member from each group go and sit in as a guest at some of their board meetings. So we started to get a sense of the issues and their priorities, and understood sort of their grand view. We started understanding, and I think it did help get us to a different place. So one possible model is to look for opportunities to partner with other organizations on fairly specific projects. Like NETA does have parent and family sort of projects going, maybe there'd be ways for F.E.A.S.T and moms and parents and NETA to sort of look at those specific projects and see where the common ground is.
Sounds like a good project. I'd like to hear from the parents.
The last Tuesday of every month, not too far from my home. It wasn't convenient because they had a meeting their meeting was at 6 o'clock and my work ended at 6 o'clock, so it was never really convenient to go to it. But I decided to work through lunch, take all these flyers and postcards and go to this meeting and talk to people there and maybe have an opportunity to share with the parents and the group this program that maybe they would want to come and experience the F.E.A.S.T experience. But it backfired in my face something huge, and I did not expect it. And I talked to Laura about it because I was so blown away. I felt like I failed. And I think when she spoke about language and you talk about passion, you sometimes don't realize what people take from what you say. So what happened was that a mother was talking about her daughter, her young adult daughter, who she had accepted she could not do anything more to help, and that she now lives at home, and every day she waits for her daughter to find her daughter dead in bed in the morning. And it struck me so intensely that I said to her, you know, I'm so sad that you have to accept to feel something like that, because it doesn't have to be that way. And somehow, in talking about F.E.A.S.T and in talking about the things that I've learned, that small group felt that I was trying to push my beliefs on them. And they felt very, very judged and angry. And I felt like I failed in being able to give the message I wanted to give. And I think that in that way, we need to learn. We need to come back and be able to come back and change the perception, because I think that that's a very, very difficult. It's very difficult to come into a community that hasn't experienced what you have and share it in a very short time. But I think it's crucial that they get to know to experience people. Like, for example, I have a hard time meeting clinicians and getting them to acknowledge that F.E.A.S.T exists, that they know about Laura and F.E.A.S.T, and I don't believe that they don't. I believe that they do, and many of them do, and are scared to death from all the gossip that they hear about what we actually are, but very few, if any, really go and have their own personal experience, because I think the personal experience is really the part that makes a difference. That once you listen to somebody, really listen to them, you can't listen to Laura and not, I just don't think you can listen to Laura and not be touched by some genuine truths that cross over what your beliefs are about treatment or recovery or the illness itself. So I think that being exposed to each other is extremely important.
I think what you're talking about too comes back down to the communication, and I think as with anything, without knowing something, ignorance, when you don't know about something, you can't really judge it, and that by sharing ideas, talking, and then learning, that's not the same as converting, and keeping an open mind.
Hi. I wanted to first speak to Carrie's point and then just make a comment about communication. But I'll introduce myself as another role. I'm on something fishy known as holding on to hope. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I don't know when it started because I'm a later comer to something fishy, I think I came on in 2006, that there is a schism even in something fishy where the philosophy of F.E.A.S.T is not acceptable. I'm not sure where it came from or how it evolved, but the thing is, as was pointed out here, we are all here to help our kids, our loved ones, our sisters, or whatever, get well. And so, as someone here told me yesterday, I have developed enough goodwill on F.E.A.S.T, and I hope now I'm not going to destroy that, but I am able to speak about F.E.A.S.T. In fact, I even promoted this conference in a very quiet way and also gave links so that people who are on F.E.A.S.T could have registered and heard what was said here today. So I really encourage this whole idea of communication and building goodwill and then getting the conversation started. I have also experienced the thing where you just jump in, and I understand what you just said. I have found that if I jump into something and people don't know me personally because they haven't interacted enough with me, or if it's all just in black and white words, I can be misinterpreted easily also. So I think this is wonderful that all of us are here and talking to each other. Now, one other thing though, important. On Carrie's point, and this came up yesterday and I have volunteered it, in my previous life, I kept with my ex-husband the road running records of the United States, long distance running. And what we did in our organization is we contacted by letter, by phone. Of course, we didn't have the internet when I started with him in 1981. We contacted every race director in the United States and asked for their results. It seems to me that NEDA, or one of the more moneyed organizations, if I could put it that way, could develop a committee such as my ex-husband and I developed, where we would have people gathering data, which is my point, from all the residential facilities about the success of not their program per se, but of their method. And then the next step of that, because it's very ironic, my husband is working with CPATH right now, and he's working with a community called CDISC, and they're developing standards for data. So to make a very simple example, if you have a questionnaire from 1 to 8 from one organization and 1 to 8 and the different numbers, you can pull the data together. So the bottom line is, I think we can pull data from all the organizations, get everybody talking together, have the same common ground of information, so that we then can go to insurance companies and the government and say what we have. And I think we lack that right now, and we really, really need the data. Thank you.
We have a longtime activist, parent activist, who, you've all met pretty good. I think she has special longitudinal work in this.
Thank you, thank you. I'm Kitty Weston, and I am a parent activist. And I remember in early 2000 sitting in a room with different organizations, and it felt like a circular firing squad, and I was really frustrated. And I remember saying, Doug probably remembers this too, Anna doesn't give a shit. Who gets credit for any of this? We have to get this done. And I'm guessing I echo the sentiment of everybody in this room. There is enough work for all of us. We don't need to do this infighting. And I think that that's a really important concept. I think it's really important to note that there's specific skill sets, and that I'm a political nerd. I love to go to Washington. I love to go to the State House. I love to lobby, and I spend a lot of my time doing that. Anybody in this room that loves to do that, then there's an organization, the EDC, that loves to do that. There's people that love to do the education prevention and want to talk to people and want to join the PFN and want to be part of the NEDA organization to do that. There's the F.E.A.S.T families that are on the forum and that are supporting and helping and encouraging each other to find the very best care that's available for their daughter or son. There's F.E.A.S.T and BETA that developed out of a total lack of attention to binge eating disorder. And people that are really saying, okay, that's where I want to put my time and energy. So I really would love to get away from the fragmenting, the fracture, the gossip around, you know, who's doing what and why, because you know what, at the end of the day, we all have the same goal. And I agree with you, Laura, that everybody sitting here, and everybody that I meet around the world when I do conferences, and when I'm speaking to people, really deeply care and have a passion and want to fight eating disorders. So that's the bottom line. So I just say, I think there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of work to do. And there's lots of ways to be involved, lots of places to put your time and energy and money.
But there is an elephant in the room.
There is an elephant in the room.
There are lots of ways for us all to get involved. There's lots of organizations for us to all get involved in. But there are some genuine ideological and science and direction issues that divide us. And, well, I mean, if we were all collecting our money together, we'd probably have enough to do some more important things, or at least to fundraise. I mean, if you ask me if I'm going to fundraise for X issue in eating disorders, I am probably not going to. But Y issue, I can get lots of parents to fundraise for that. But we can't deny, it's not that eating disorders is this issue that we all agree on, and we're all going to want to work together, because as soon as you start writing down what the actual issue is, and certain words come up in it, evidence-based, prevention, any of those, I mean, I could just list brain disorder, people's heads explode, you know, sort of, and then the conversation ends and everybody's at each other's throats. The terms, you can't even make a document together because everyone's got, and these are not small divisions, these are deeply emotional issues. And F.E.A.S.T has, I think it has the reputation it has, partially because we use certain words that make other people's heads explode. And it isn't so much because we actually disagree on the facts, but because our focus is different. So that's the elephant in the room, is we actually don't all agree.
I would just say, maybe the goal should be give them a headache, not have their heads explode. Like, you should not back off your point of your language or what stance you've taken. Can you convey it, which is, when I have this conversation, can you convey it in a way that is hearable and bearable to other people? And sometimes
Well, that's been hard, as we all know. That some of you are not in on, I think, the fighting, so I'm very glad about that. But we have several people who want to talk here.
Hi. You know, just to sort of come back to what the woman had said about things seeming a little abstract, I know our organization has strong relationships with sort of, I guess we would say, both camps. And as a clinician, we rely heavily on your website, on other FET websites, because at the end of that first session, when parents look at us like, you're expecting me to do what? And we wish we could spend another 4 hours preparing them. We really feel like your information is part of our team, because we direct families to go home and go to you guys in the middle of the night when they feel like they're the only people who are awake. At the same time, there are all these rumblings that we try and stay out of because of the function, which we use those websites, but it's still very confusing. I mean, I remember one day taking 2 laptops, opening up both pages and trying to decode what 2 different websites around in sort of, I guess, the Maudsley camps or F.E.A.S.T, and trying to figure out what are the differences here, which I think is what you're saying is this is seeming sort of abstract in terms of 2 different, you know, when there's different organizations working towards the same goal but using different semantics. I guess, can you speak more to the differences?
I mean, I don't want to avoid debate, because I think you all know I love debate. But
and I'm not trying, I guess I mean more as just helping people be informed in terms of.
I'm actually not, we can, I mean, if we want to talk about conflicts within, you know, the smaller parent community, I'm actually, the reason I wanted to have this conversation was more about the parent community in general, not just us, and the larger eating disorder community. Like, what are the ways that we bounce off one another? And there really is genuine controversy, genuine problems. Am I wrong?
Well, and I guess just to say, I'm not discuss the conflict, but more just helping people understand different theoretical frames.
I don't even, if we get down into that level, I think we might lose the scale of math that we're working at right now. Right now, I think the thing to focus on, and we can next time, I think maybe we'll have a session just like on that, but there's a bigger issue, is parents forming our own little world where there is an eating disorder world already, there are organizations. What is the particular role and needs of parents, and should we be joining or conjoining and synergistic? And that's where I'd like to go.
Can I just ask, is it fair to say that we are basically not welcome in the larger picture because we really feel strongly about our beliefs and the words that we want to use, and the tree does not like the new branch that has become?
Feast is controversial, there's no question.
With every growth, there needs to be a new branch, or you don't grow further. And I guess I'm just questioning if they realize how important it is that we have a voice where we didn't.
You know what, I would not presume to speak myself for the parent community, not to mention be able to speak for the larger eating disorder world, which I also live in. I mean, I work and volunteer in the larger eating disorder world.
But I'm trying to ask, is that a fair synopsis to give anyone who's wondering what we're exactly talking about?
I think that people and organizations in the eating disorder world they're very individual, and their attitudes about, are not, there's no lockstep, there's no horrible group out there conspiring against. It really is a lot of individuals.
Do we want to join that group?
That's, the dynamic that I think we're talking about.
Lisa's been waiting so patiently.
I'm just jumping out of my skin.
I'm
so sorry. I'm relatively new to this, and so I'm not exactly familiar with the controversy. And when my daughter was diagnosed in May, I was referred by the doctor to the F.E.A.S.T model, and that has been my model. And now I have a desire to be an advocate. I want to go to my pediatricians, I want to go to the schools, and I want to talk to them about recognizing eating disorders and making appropriate referrals. But I am a cautious person. I know I have an orientation, but I'm not a type of person who likes to force my orientation. So can you tell me, where is the common ground? I want to walk into those offices, those schools, and talk to people in a balanced manner. Why can't we tell us today, where is the common ground? That's what we're talking about.
I'm learning a lot here, by the way.
I think the common ground is you want everyone, pediatricians, teachers, doctors, to be aware of and look for signs and symptoms of an eating disorder. I think that is definitely a common ground for all of us in this room, for every organization, whether it is for looking for someone who may be having binge eating or anorexia or bulimia or whatever. That's the common ground to start with. I think where we get off track and we get to the point where we have major disagreements and discussions about is how do you get that person towards recovery. But that's the common ground, and I think, are we all in agreement with that? We're not all in agreement?
Well, we are,
But
Chris, I'd like to hear.
yeah, I guess what I'm objecting to right now is the idea that every single parent that's on F.E.A.S.T has used family-based treatment, has used evidence-based treatments. That's not the case. What I would like to see for the common ground is that everybody is offered information about every option for treatment and recovery that's out there. So it's immediately available to everybody, and you get to choose. Maybe there's different, like you want to go with this treatment, you can go here, here's referrals there, here's referrals there, and let the parents make up their own minds rather than just being told this is the only way. There's a lot of different ways, and in our family, it was years and years of failed treatments, and then some evidence-based treatment that got her kind of like changed around, and now as an adult, starting at age 11, now she's 24, and she's working really hard for her own recovery. And I'm really having nothing to do with it other than giving her support and getting her sort of started in the right direction. That late switch changed in the mid-20s.
But yeah, let's just give everybody all the information that's out there and let the parents make their own mind which way they want to go. You know, that's my opinion.
I'm an Aussie. I'll keep my message simple. We haven't had anything like this occur in Australia, have we, Bridget? But we'll go home and make it happen somehow. We don't have anything like NEDA, and I love going to the NEDA conferences. I really like Mosley Parent Site for another reason, and I love F.E.A.S.T. I'm a bit like Carrie here. I'm a writer and a survivor. I've only been out of my cage 5 years, and I'm making the most of it. And the reason I've become an advocate is because my parents didn't understand my illness, and so I became alienated. So I want to congratulate every parent that's here today, because I know you care. And I don't care about this other crap. I care about getting a message out. I haven't got time for the negativity. To me, that's the illness dragging energy away from the sunlight. And we need to focus on what is working. We can all agree that early intervention is crucial. Let's work on what we do know, and the other things will largely take care of themselves. And I love Doug's suggestion that where you had a member from the AED and NEDA sat in on each other's committee. I think that is to be encouraged. I think that would encourage collaboration. That's what we need. Let's focus on what works, what we know, on the consensus that we do have. And I do agree that not everybody can do everything for everybody. We do need specialist groups. I know I have the greatest respect for Chavez here, because she saw a need and she's gone out and made it happen. And as she said, you don't know where it's going to lead. It's like a rippling brook with, rocks in the brook. We don't know. It's not ever going to stay the same. But the main thing is we're going all in the same direction. That's my message.
Thanks. I'd just like to take a step slightly outwards. As a paediatrician, we're often, and I'm not talking about eating disorders specifically at the moment, we are often asked about how to, parents will often say, what should I look at on the internet, or I've looked at such and such on the internet and I've been terrified. And so we feel a slight responsibility to be able to guide parents through the internet a little bit, because there's good and bad on it. I think that as a paediatrician, I would feel very cautious about referring to a website community that I thought was going to create more difficulties, more sort of complications and ambiguities for parents who are already in a very difficult position. And generally, my approach is to refer to places that can give good amounts of information, and and to keep it very informative on that basis. But I would worry about feeling that I was going to make things worse for families than better.
Can I ask a general question of parents, and then I know that they want to speak back there. To the parents in the audience, did you find the information you needed as parents, not the general eating disorder information, but as parents, on the more mainstream eating disorder organization websites?
No. Yes.
Like NEDA?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I didn't find anything useful on NEDA.
Or even by calling them.
Some original stuff.
The parent manual on NEDA is incredibly outstanding and helpful. And when parents know about it, they have all these resources in this great manual.
I don't think it was easy to
I
find
don't
on the
agree.
website for me. I think the
Okay,
website
then
had
their
too much other
website
stuff.
needs
It
to be
wasn't straight
fixed.
to the point from what I needed to
Okay,
hear.
so it's not navigable.
There are other general organizations. There are statewide. Are you getting the kind of information that you need from the broader organizations that are dealing also with patients and clinicians, or is, because I personally find that parent-specific information is a little different, but I want to know if that's your experience.
Can I ask, is the question that you're trying to ask, would it be what information in particular are parents here looking for that they may not be getting at some places, so that we can kind of, you know?
I'm kind of bringing it back to, do parents need something more specific?
Okay.
And is that need being met in the more mainstream, broad, not just parent community? We have some opinions that want to be shared. I'm sorry, I'm not avoiding anyone. There are certain people that haven't been heard from, and I wanted to make sure that they got their voices.
Hi, my name is Morgan O'Toole. I'm the CEO of Cartini Clinic in Portland, Oregon. And as far as I'm aware, I think I'm the only administrative head of a private facility, a treatment facility here today. And I think the vast majority of care is undertaken at private facilities, at least in the United States. And I think I have, Laura and I have had long discussions about the role of parents. And I'd like to echo something that Kitty said, or just follow up on it. It is true that I think there's a unified goal, and I think the gentleman put it very succinctly. It's all about outcome. And that's the only thing that really matters at the end of the day. But that's not the same thing as a strategy. And I think what's lacking is a strategic vision for the role of a parent organization, whether it's F.E.A.S.T or anyone else. And in my opinion, speaking as a businessman, and I'll forget the parlance of business speak, but I see the role of parents as a consumer advocacy group. You are ultimately the consumers of a product, and you should be demanding what that product looks like, what it feels like, and what it costs. And there need to be more people like myself who are invited to come to a conference like this and defend ourselves to you, justify what we do, and listen, and in a respectful but demanding fashion. I think parents need to say, this is what we want, this is how we want it, and the industry needs to respond. And I think, F.E.A.S.T has an opportunity to galvanize a grassroots movement through the internet, through the use of social networks, to distribute information in a way that's clearly not being done, I think that's fair to say, from the response in the audience. And that's, as I see it, the role of F.E.A.S.T is to galvanize that, push for the industry to respond to the needs, needs of the consumers. That's what I'd love to see.
Thank you.
Sorry, I need to stand up. I know everybody's like, that's the elephant in the room that we haven't talked about. And thank you. You just blew me away, because you are an administrator of a long-term care, or a residential, and
We're day treatment. But
okay. That's what I refer to as money. And we need to link with these people that, I know many of us have had only short-term, our kids have only been in a year or so. But I'm talking 8 years of long-term with my daughter. And being out there in the community and having the money. I had the money. I had the ability to put my daughter in the places, and I was left without them. I was left alone, and she was in the facilities. And this is happening today. It's happening continually and continually. So thank you for acknowledging that there is a link that the parents need, and this is F.E.A.S.T. And I'm sorry I stood up. I started, but I think that had to be the link.
Diane, I appreciate you saying that, and
I'm kind of speaking here from, I'm a clinician from training, and I was actually trained in the old kinds of theories about eating disorders. I went into the substance abuse field, and I have to tell you that my daughter had a good 14 years of the wrong kind of treatments. And it was only through me finding out about F.E.A.S.T, really, and finding a family-based person who believed in helping my daughter, a young adult, a thriving, potentially thriving young adult, that this was the way to go. And I'll tell you what the difference is and what happened for me, because I'm a medical person. I heard Dr. K over here. I was sent, and I just honed in on everything that was really going to touch my heart and make me finally understand where the problems lie. And I said, I am determined now, because I'm going to start crying, I'm sorry. I had blind faith because I was a clinician, you know, a practitioner for many years. I gave up my profession because of it. I was so ashamed of my profession. And when I saw that there was something else out there, that I could have hope, and I could learn that I had the power to do something different. And that's what the difference was. And it was not just, you know, mothers talking about whatever we can do. I've learned everything through all those other mothers, how to do it. It's not just do it, but how to do it. And what was going to really help me to just fight for my daughter until she could fight for herself. And it was learning all of the science and really understanding what's going on. Because I was misled, just like everybody else. I felt like it was all my fault. And that I used to be told things we had a clinician said, oh, your daughter's just having a temper tantrum, and she was really severely ill. And if you only did this, she wouldn't be that. And my daughter, until this day, until yesterday, she was here, and she said, you know what, Mom? I am so proud of you. And I said, you know, I'm really proud of you, because she felt that it was all her fault. And just like Carrie said, she felt like a failure, and she was made to believe that she was not a treatment, that she couldn't respond to whatever treatment was given to her, but she was given the wrong treatment.
Thank you. We only have about 2-3 minutes left. 2-3 minutes. More questions?
I joined the forum, I think it was like 5 years ago. Before we had F.E.A.S.T and all of the, by the way, I'm Axa Carnes Maria. Before all the F.E.A.S.T information on science was there was the forum. And for me, I was very fortunate that we went to a pediatrician who immediately recognized her daughter had an eating disorder. And she said to me, you have to be so careful with these young kids who we send them to, because they can get so messed up if we send them to the wrong person. She sent us to a Maudsley theorist. I said, because when we went there, she says, this is a brain disorder, you didn't cause it, nothing you did caused this. She said, you're going to do Maudsley, go Google it, and you're going to take her home and feed her. And we spun our wheels for a year trying to feed this child, and it wasn't until we went to the forum. The difference between the forum and F.E.A.S.T now and every other website, is that it gives you the day-to-day how to do it. And I was able to save our daughter's life with really very little support from the therapist, because I was taught how to do it. That's number one. Number two, I went back to our therapist and I said, listen, this is what I needed from you. You should have given me the book, you know, how to help your teenager beat an eating disorder. You should have given me Eating with Your Anorexic, and I gave her a list of books. I needed that. You told me to go feed her, but you didn't give me any tools. Since then, she's referred 3 people to me to talk to them. They've all read the books. Oh yeah, so-and-so told me to read all these books. And they're being told about F.E.A.S.T. And I've been invited to be a part of a group in my state that, you know, is trying to be a group about eating disorders. So that's another story. But anyway, nothing speaks like success. And if you have a success story of sustained recovery, no one can argue against that.
Next question. I'll give you the floor, and you will let us go to our break. But I want to thank everyone for this conversation. Thank you very, very much, and we will continue it. And if you have thoughts that you want to give me later, because I know a lot of people still wanted to speak, please do, because I